You're listening to This Week in No Code plus AI, with weekly episodes sharing the latest advancements of AI, plus exclusive interviews, founders using these tools. So without any further ado, let's get started. Welcome to This Week in No Code plus AI. I'm JJ, and we've got an incredible show lined up for you this week, as always. We'll be sitting down with the one and only Max, who is employee number 3 at n8n, to hear about the fascinating story of how they've transformed into one of today's hottest AI agent platforms. But first, we got some exciting news from the AI world. As always, AI keeping it hot, keeping it juicy. So here is your AI news of the week. The AI landscape is buzzing with major developments. Former OpenAI CTO Mira Murati is making headlines with her new venture, Thinking Machines Lab. She's assembled an all-star team of about 30 researchers and engineers, including some familiar faces like OpenAI's co-founder John Schulman as chief scientist and Barrett Zolf as CTO. Now, what's really interesting is that about 2/3 of the team are former OpenAI colleagues. And now at this company, they're focusing on making AI more customizable and accessible while keeping human values at the core of their development. And word is they're trying to raise $1 billion. Very interesting to see so many former OpenAI colleagues now trying to create a more human value-centric AI that's customizable, that you can read between the lines there. Anyways, moving on to HP. They acquired Humane's assets this week. You remember the Humane pin? They bought it for $116 million, including the Cosmo platform. If you're eyeing the pin, it's going out of style because it's getting discontinued on February 27th, and you can get your refunds. Otherwise, the pin literally just won't work, and you will only be able to check the battery level of it. So it was really cool technology, maybe too far ahead of its time. Interested to see what HP does. They acquired a great team, great tech, but HP is HP. I guess they plan to use this tech to revolutionize their smart printers and PCs. Who knows? It's HP. Other big news of the week is California State University system just made history with the largest ever ChatGPT deployment in education, rolling it out to over 500,000 students and faculty. This is huge for the future of AI in higher education. Students are already using it. Now they just get free access to it. What does that mean generally? I don't know. I think the education system is going to start creating a lot more people that know how to prompt better. That's cool. Otherwise, I got some exciting news on the Softr front. We are launching a new build contest with Softr utilizing the latest blocks. All you need to do is create an app of your choice. Just use the latest user table and navigation blocks that we just released last week at Softr. Once you finish your app, post it on X and our Softr forum by March 2nd to win some prizes. We've made some incredible updates. I think you guys will really love it. It takes just an afternoon to build an entire app in Softr. If you haven't tried it, this is a great chance to try it. Build something cool, submit it online for everyone else to see, add that to your portfolio of things that you could do, and you will not regret it. Final announcement of today is my AI agent course is getting very close to launching on March 1st. You will learn how to build 10 different agents in 5 different platforms. And here's a mind-blowing fact that I recently learned. Some automation agencies are building agentic workflows and agentic systems that they then license to other companies to use for the tune of $50,000 or more per year. These skills that you will learn in this course and by listening to this podcast are serious skills that are very helpful in many aspects of life. And this course will teach you all the beginner basics of getting started by building so many different agents that will really benefit you for years to come. So I hope to see you in that course. If you're interested, go to nocodealliance.org/courses to check out the latest course there. But otherwise, let's bring Max onto the show. I'm so excited for this interview, his energy, the last 5 years of n8n, the journey that they have had, and now as one of the hottest AI agent companies. Max, welcome to the show.
My pleasure, JJ. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. It's always great chatting with you. You got a great personality, a great vibe to you. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you ended up at n8n as one of the first employees.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Max, the original flowgrammer, as some folks in our community like to say. I do as well. And yeah, so I'm Max. I started off as head of design at n8n. I'm now a
When was
developer
that?
advocate. So that was I'm going on my LinkedIn right now. Okay. That was about 5 years ago. So
Okay.
I'm about a month away from 5 years at
Okay, and that
n8n.
was employee number 3, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So 003.
At that
And
time, what were things like at n8n?
Sure, yeah. So we had just launched on Product Hunt, and it started off as a kitchen table project by our CEO. So he was doing a job like we all do to pay the rent, building n8n on the side, and then he launched it on Product Hunt, and it became Product Hunt number one. It got Product Hunt of the Week, I believe, number one. And from there, as you can imagine, he got a lot of attention because when it came out, at that time, our messaging and positioning has evolved quite a bit, as has the
Yeah.
offering. But at that point, it was dubbed the open source Zapier. At that time, a lot of
Oh,
conversation around hosting your data, obviously data sovereignty and stuff, was becoming a thing. And I think automation platforms, the more useful they are, the more they have your like private keys and everything, right? It's like
yeah.
this unavoidable thing. So I think that obviously got us a lot of attention as well as from day one. And I think we've stayed really true to this. It is designed for a more technical individual. So obviously technicality is a big range.
Yeah.
We don't mean you're a low level developer necessarily, but we do expect that like an ideal user, I would say, again, different people collaborate in a workflow, but an ideal user knows what a variable is, knows what a get request is. A lot of our users use ChatGPT to help them with some of those steps, but our
Yeah.
ideal user is a bit more technical. And I think what we've arrived on after 5 years is something that's like a developer would describe and as there's no glass ceiling most of the time. Like they don't feel boxed in. If you've ever used, let's say as a video editor, if you've ever used iMovie and you're used to Final Cut Pro, you're like, get me out of here. I hate this. It's like that.
Yeah, so you don't get I guess we'll come back to scalability and performance stuff later. I wanna keep going on to the journey of Max going through n8n. So you're employee number 3, head of design, early days. So it was always open source from day 1.
Yeah, it's just an interesting story there. So when we came out day one, we called ourselves open source, and there's FOSS. This is a specific definition of open source. That community really defends those terms, and I think it makes sense. They fought for a long time to define what to them means open source. So we ourselves do not call ourselves open source. So we started off, and to this day, we're a fair code licensed product. This is actually a child of our CEO Jan, and the whole thinking behind that, the rationale when he created it was he saw what happened to the likes of Elastic with Amazon, right? Open source license, big companies come in and would use that license, get a bunch of revenue for it, put all of the support back onto the community product. So this was really Jan's sort of challenge to say, hey, look, open source is amazing. We love open source. Every employee at n8n gets 100 euros a month to donate to their favorite open source projects. Like it's really in our blood. But it was a challenge. What if there is an alternative? Right. And that's something that actually really attracted me, his boldness, honestly, to say, hey, let's come up with an alternative that basically, when you're commercializing this open source software, there's a few considerations, but for the long tail, for 95% of other folks, it is open source. So I'll say that with an asterisk, but I'm very proud that he took on that journey to be part of that and creating an alternative that a few other players have now signed on and are using as well.
Very smart foresight there from him. So employee number 3, moving up through the ranks. Talk about those first couple of years. Was it slow growth? Was it fast growth? Did the community immediately take to you? What was it like there?
Yeah. So the thing that given my background, like I had worked at one or two startups before this, is from day one, immense word of mouth, to be honest. I would say to today, that's still the case. But yeah, so obviously that growth is, and when you look at a hockey stick, obviously it's been getting more intense.
Yeah.
But for a four-person company back then, and since then, I would say there's been pretty amazing growth. Growth has not usually been our challenges. It's usually like the things that come from growing
Yeah.
and that sort of thing.
So that's great. So people have seen you as an open source Zapier, maybe a more professional, scalable Zapier. You're riding that wave, you're growing, revenue is growing, the team is growing. What might have been like a challenge that you might have faced along the way of just, man, this isn't working, or we just don't have enough support here, or every successful story has those challenges of just like getting over that hump.
Absolutely. I think the one thing, we're based in Europe and there's a lot of benefits to that. One of the things, it's a little harder to hire in terms of time. Usually folks need a longer time to stop and whatnot. So I would say over the years, if you ask like any head of, any manager was always like, geez, could I use another person? Because
Yeah.
we know what to do. We just have that painful like prioritization making.
Yeah.
And I think that was particularly true on n8n, given our complexity. One
Hmm.
thing I always advocated for the company was take Notion. Stellar product, stellar growth, of course. I don't think anyone would question that. If you look at the thing that they took on, the challenge that they bit off, I would say my own opinion is technically it's a simpler thing that they intended to achieve. Still infinitely complex. Still, of course, complex when you're talking about scaling it and saying, look, every single user around the world has a latency of X or Y, right? But fundamentally, take n8n, over 1,000 integrations, credentials to maintain there, that all working. Each one of those has like infinite complexity and can break. And that's just like the integrations themselves, right? One of the biggest, I think, complexity multipliers with n8n, I think, was also having multiple distribution methods. So from day zero, we have weekly releases. We've still for 5 years have had weekly releases. So there's a self-hosted version. Under that self-hosted version, there's Docker, there's NPM. There's been a few different sort of ways to consume it that we've supported officially. Underneath each of those, multiple databases that we support. So like the combinatorics of that variable, that's just self-hosted. We then have our cloud offering, which does run on the same tech under the hood, but there's some layers on top, there's complexity. So that was the first time that at the scale of company that I had worked at, that we had bitten off multiple distribution. And I think that definitely created some challenges. But at this stage, I think it's also one of those things like if you have something that you have to do, those muscles get stronger.
Hmm.
So what I see in the organization 5 years in now is I think compared to a lot of other players that are now getting into multiple distribution, obviously we have some muscles and competency around that really helps us at this stage because I think self-hosting open source definitely helping us today with enterprise sales and across the board, as you can imagine, from a guy who wants to tinker on his Raspberry Pi, can do that. You can run on a Raspberry Pi, up to I got it on my big mega cluster, locked concrete basement, also possible. Actually, there's one of my coolest installs I heard of is there's a cruise ship currently around the world right now that has n8n running on a Raspberry Pi, completely disconnected from the internet, only works on their local intranet.
Wow. That's pretty cool. So talk to us about the open source model in terms of the cloud hosted model and like for the user that is just coming to NAN, the different options that they have. And with the cloud option being the easiest and what everyone is used to, but also the benefits of taking it and hosting it yourself, but also maybe the added complications of that.
Yeah, sure. So JJ, as you said, we got basically two main flavors. There's also enterprise, which has some different flavors. Again, if that's interesting to you, we've got a sales team. The cloud is where most folks start, even folks who intend to self-host, because as you can imagine, a couple clicks and you're set up, right?
And you
The
get the auto updates, everything.
everything,
Yeah.
right? So the biggest benefit to cloud is what you would typically have on a managed solution relative to self-hosting. That is, you have to like on self-hosting, you have to do your own DevOps, right? So what does that mean if you don't know what DevOps is? You have to handle your own backups. That I would say is actually the most painful thing that we see sometimes with folks self-hosting. They didn't know they have to back up and they come to our community forum. Hey, I lost 3 months worth of workflows and we have to break the news to them. Hey, we're really sorry. But like self-hosting is also a responsibility. And there's some things that you did not know to do. And that data is gone. That's the most brutal, difficult conversation that we have. And obviously in our UX and stuff and in the documentation, we
Yeah.
try to alert
Yeah.
people to that. But it's basically you have to be your own adult. Or you can go on cloud and you can go have fun. You can go set up your workflows. You can know
Like
that
going to an all inclusive or just like traveling
exactly.
Europe by yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Like with that bumming it, like on in hostels and stuff. That's exactly it. At 3 in the morning on a Sunday, when your workflow goes down, there's a guy at n8n monitoring that,
Yeah.
etc. So that's like the one big benefit you would get in kind of any SaaS first managed. The other big thing with n8n, and it's one critique that we sometimes get on the self-hosted version, but I'm here to say it's like a technical reality of self-hosting, is on a lot of cloud products, you have that click to connect experience, right? You click, there's a little pop-up, you sign into Gmail, whatever, and you're in. We have that on cloud for most services. On self-hosted, you're going to have to go set up that yourself.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to go create your own OAuth client app and stuff. For some apps, there's approvals processes. For Google, it's pretty tricky. So we sometimes have folks stuck on that on self-hosted for, let's say, an hour. Again, if you're a
Oh,
developer,
I
that's
see.
going to take 10 minutes. You set it up. But if you're non-technical, the really frustrating thing is I would say we probably lose users because they choose to self-host. They get stuck on credential setup. And
Mm.
in that current journey, they were not aware on cloud, it's click to connect, and they go, oh, n8n doesn't work, or n8n's creds don't work. It's like they do. There's just like a burden of setup on self-hosted.
I wasn't aware of that. And
Yeah.
credentials are very popular and important in AN, given all the connections that you're making to so many different platforms. So that seems like quite a burden.
Yeah. Yeah. So that I would say is the biggest benefit. But I would say we love our users no matter where you're hosting it. There's a lot of users that self-host that come to cloud. There's a lot of users that never come to cloud. They're just part of our community. And
Yeah.
again, I would say that's our moat. When you talk about moats and startup space, and someone could duplicate our code, someone could remake n8n, of course, with enough resources. They can't recreate our community, not
Yeah.
overnight. That took years in human relationships. And so I would say that's the biggest benefit there. And also, again, I think why we have such a strong community and why I think for some companies, like open source ish, and then they just focus on customers. Like to us, a user is a user.
Yeah. With NAN, it's very flexible in terms of a lot of our listeners come from the bubble world where we have backend workflows, we have logic there. And I think the easy thing with NAN is you can easily put together like a webhook endpoint, an HTTP request, and then send all of your workflows to NAN to process something really complex and then send it back to Bubble. When I've done this recently with one of my SaaSes, trade backlinks, where I have a flow that handles all of the emails in an AI way, processes it, reads, all that kind of stuff. And it was just getting too much to build in Bubble. And so I sent that to NAN. NAN sent that whole thing and then sent it back as a webhook request. And I just found that experience to be more powerful. And also, like in Bubble, I feel like the workflows that I were building there were like 90% capacity. And in NAN, when I put it there, it was like 10% capacity. Or just like I could expand on this forever. And it's a lot better long term than what I was seeing in Bubble. And what I'm trying to get at here is no matter what platform you're using, as long as you can hit an API call and receive those API calls, pretty much you can use NAN in many different ways.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one thing I noticed, JJ, is folks sometimes say it's like, hey, like HubSpot's got this, my automation tool, or Bubble's got automation. And I'll be the first person to say, look, if you need to do something simple like in Bubble, you need to send an email. I would say it's probably bad architectural design to get n8n
Right.
involved just to send that email. More moving parts. Any engineer will tell you there's
Right.
probably points of failure. But when you need something more complicated, when you need general purpose automation, that's where you can bring in the right tool for the right job. And honestly, almost 5 years now building n8n, I could not imagine how a separate vendor that's just said, hey, to a squad, hey, go build like an automation tool or automation feature, how they could ever compete. Just like we have some overlapping functionality of other tools where we do the 10%, and then for the rest, go to them. Same exact thing.
So recently, NAN is just blowing up, and folks have posted search results on Google of just make Zapier and NAN just exploding. I personally think one of the reasons why is because you guys have a really great AI agent node. Not that is not only really great, but also very visual. The part of the visual canvas of just like, here's my agent, let me share it online, and then you can see it working and everything. Is that part of like how did you guys get into this AI agent node and like how did that happen?
It's a really funny story. This happened. Don't quote me on the dates. I'm terrible at dates, but it's about a year ago. Our PMs will probably be like, no, Max, it was 16 months. You're underselling us. But a long time in AI space, right? Our CEO basically said, hey guys, I was looking at LangChain. At this point, LangChain was making the rounds. And he said, I think by happenstance, the way that n8n is architected, it might be really easy to integrate LangChain. And then we would have basically LangChain nodes in n8n. Before anyone had a chance to reply to him, because I remember when I read this message, I will say this on camera. I DM'd him and was like, Jan, do not do this. You're going to distract our focus. We're an automation tool. We should
Interesting.
focus on this, which is funny because now I'm the guy who's paid to talk about AI at n8n. So it's a very funny, but I'm very glad the man didn't listen to me. But basically, and this happened a few features or a few times at n8n, Jan, our CEO, found himself on a long haul flight. So he didn't have internet. And he's a CEO. He doesn't get to code as much anymore. As an engineer, that's his background. I'm sure he misses that sometimes. But he's on the plane. He can build locally. He had LangChain and he integrated it. Or he did like a POC on the plane. Guy's a genius, by the way, if that's not clear from
Yeah,
the
if
whole
that's not
integration
clear.
chain in like an airplane
Yeah.
ride. And he showed it to us and we spent a little bit more on it and we got it out. And it was really rough, to be honest, in terms of like where we are today. But I think for all the reasons that kind of you described, for all the reasons of, let's say like this, I think the best AI engineers, if we're talking about prompting, because I don't know about yourself, after you figure out the basics, after you get your tool set up, it's mostly on the prompting. I think there's different kinds of brains that are going to excel at that. We're going to see different profiles there. And with n8n, it's visual, it's accessible. You see the logs of how it's thinking. There's a lot to understand if this was scary for you. If you looked at something that was native code or LangChain itself, I don't know, it's still syntax. This removed that to allow a whole wider group of people to go, wait, I might be good at this. And then with n8n, again, cloud set it up, test it, and they got to see that feedback really quickly. I think that's the real growth. And I think the last thing there is people talk about, there'll be these debates about AGI, and we're talking about Sam Altman and Elon. And as soon as the discourse goes there, I zone out because I feel like that is like AI punditry conversation for mass consumption. For me, I mostly talk to builders, AI agency consultants, editor community members, people who are using AI every day, and people who do not get paid unless they get the job done. And the things they're talking about, the models they're talking about, the technologies they're talking about, the use cases they're talking about, completely different conversation to what's happening here. Because it's not as sexy, right? It's oh, hey, client asked me to complete a use case. I did. We used AI for some of it, and it worked. That's not very attractive story. But it's awesome if you need that problem solved. And I think that's why we're seeing that growth, because we showed that to people. They tried it. They felt that aha. Like if you've ever flowgrammed, when you see the green lights and it's working, your AI's on
Yeah.
right? You like want to share that. You're like, I just created this is my baby. I want to share it. I think that's why, honestly. So it was a right time. Jan, good idea
Yeah.
out there. And then execution on continuing on that and like following the market and making sure those pieces are in place in this fast evolving, basically 2024 and into now.
Yeah, I think it was right around a year or a little bit more than that because we broke that news on this show that NAN, I remember doing that segment, that read of NAN introduced LangChain and that AI agent node. I think you have up to what 398 pre-built connectors for automated workflows,
Yeah, a
and you
lot.
combine this with LangChain and you get so much more. So it feels like a really big integration for this platform that's really exciting to see. And I love their visual like drag and drop builder that they have and like
Yeah.
how easy that is. And they still have simple debugging and monitoring and AI automations. You could do a lot with this. So it's another great kind of workflow AI builder. I have been doing a lot of work with NAN recently for my upcoming AI agent course, and I have really loved it. Maybe you can give us a little demo for those that are tuning in on a visual YouTube or whatever of a little intro to what NAN is. Give us some maybe pro tips. What do you say?
Absolutely. I'd love to.
Cool.
As a flowgrammer, I'm always happy to share my screen, talk flows.
All right. So Max has shown his screen. We're seeing a very basic flow.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm going to do, guys, this is an AI workflow, but the thing to point out, each of the steps here are nodes in n8n. A step runs, passes data along to the next step, and so on and so forth. This is going to have an AI focus. But again, I think a lot of people in the AI space, they get so excited about AI, they forget that, again, a solution usually needs a lot of non-AI steps to get the job done. So just a quick PSA, there's like hundreds of apps and services and things that are non-AI related and generic HTTP requests and stuff. So basically, like we were talking earlier, if it has an API or some kind of protocol, you can connect with it, you can send data there and what. As I was saying, so n8n lets you build workflows, and workflows are multi-step processes that automate stuff, right? This example here, I've got some AI steps going here, and if I go into this trigger here, we can see that it's got some data here. Now, I just set this data for testing, but what happens is if I run this node, and let's say I open up this step, we can see on the input, so this is the data coming into my node right now, we've got that text to translate that I created in my last step. So again, if this was a HubSpot node in the last step and there was a new contact, I'd have various information from that contact. And I can actually just drag and drop that in here, which I already did, and basically set up this step here. I then can run this step. It outputs some data. In this case, we're translating the text that was coming in into German.
P.S. As former head of design, how much of your design is still in there? Like that input output dialogue.
I would say so. The input output, the 60, 70%, like across the app. See, a lot of the details will be like at the parameter level and stuff, right? So
Yeah.
I've had some colleagues do some amazing with this fixed expression. Oh, like, sorry, that was me too. With some of this stuff, like this view here, amazing work from Julian. What? But yeah, there's a little bit of Max
So you're
across the
pretty
US
much
too.
saying that you're a legend.
I'm not saying that, JJ, but if you want to say that so I can use it on my pull
There
quotes,
we
then
go.
man.
There we go. Good work,
Um,
pal. Let's keep
Thank you,
going.
man. So yeah, basically a node takes data in, you set it up with various parameters which change depending on that step, and then it outputs some data. That's n8n nodes in a nutshell. You can see this text classifier, it's a good example. Nodes can branch out logically sometimes.
And that
Um,
classifier, is it just powered by some kind of LLM model then?
Yeah, so that's being powered by this Azure OpenAI chat model. So this is a locally hosted GPT model running
Cool.
right now. So that's n8n nodes in a nutshell. I am using AI nodes here, but again, any node, if this was the HubSpot node, it would output some data. You'd route that into the next step and so on and so forth. Logical cases, again, here, if it's English, we might want to do something else after here. Maybe we're sending it to Slack for, right? So that's
Now,
nodes in n8n.
quickly, let me backtrack to what you just said. This specific AI model that you're using to power this workflow automation is locally hosted.
To clarify, it's hosted on Azure in our own infrastructure. So it depends how you mean locally. Not locally in my computer, but locally in n8n's SOC 2 approved space. So this is where I can work with use cases where I could send PII, personally identifiable information, that sort of thing.
So you're saying that, and you're using the cloud instance right now, right?
Yeah.
So you can have a hybrid solution where you use the cloud instance, but essentially upload your own ML, LLMs in your own environments to keep that data on site in your own
Oh, yeah.
environment.
Really good point. JJ, it's funny. Some of the things like you just, I don't know, that would be maybe a USP for a product marketing manager. To us, that's just normal. But yes, that's right. So on here, for example, these are the various models that I can use.
So we're seeing like
And
all the models available to us right away, but
yeah,
those are all hosted and we're going to hit their servers for that, right?
so here's the thing about that. So this, let's take the OpenAI chat model, for example.
Hmm.
Let's drag that on here. So again, this is the Azure OpenAI chat model,
Yeah.
but this is the official one. So by default, I can add my OpenAI account,
Yeah.
right? And if we run this, it's
And
going to
that's
work.
what everyone can do. You can go to OpenAI, get your
Exactly.
API key, you can run it, and that will
Yeah.
work. But you're
And
hitting
on
their servers.
exactly. And on cloud right now, if you create a new account, you can also get 100 free OpenAI calls as well to
Cool.
get started.
Cool.
But if I change the base URL in the credential itself to a different base URL, I could use any OpenAI supported LM. What I mean by that is OpenAI, the way they communicate with services like n8n is they have a standard schema. Most of the industry adopted that schema. So in fact, before we had the DeepSeek node, which we have natively today, a lot of users were interacting with DeepSeek just by changing this base root URL. So I'll mention that, and I think it's maybe one of those pro tips
Mm.
is in n8n, if you search for something and we don't have it, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not possible to n8n. And most of the time it is possible because it's so flexible. Specifically with LLM models, the first thing you're going to want to try, is it an OpenAI supported spec? If so, you could use the OpenAI chat model and change that base URL. Is it open source? If so, Olama is a great one. Obviously, you got Hugging Face as well, which is a big repo. Open Router, same thing. They handle swapping models under the hood. Lots of different options. So do check those first. Yeah, because there's actually a lot more. These are not models that we support, right? These are model vendors and or yeah, these are model vendors. And again, you can swap base URLs. This list is actually representing probably thousands of models at this point.
Incredible. I wasn't actually aware of that you can just bring your own model. And DeepSeek originally it's an open source, so people were just self-hosting that, and they're just hitting the self-hosted models using n8n in that way.
Yeah, exactly. The nice thing
Beautiful.
about this is even if you don't have some very stringent security requirements like SOC 2, I don't know, I'm building a LinkedIn like pro AI inbox, and I do not want OpenAI to have a live stream of my LinkedIn inbox. That just
Right.
cannot be for me long term. So I'm going to use a self-hosted model for that. Yeah.
Great. Beautiful. That's really cool. That is really cool. So why don't you move into the AI agent node for us? Because I
Okay.
see so many people are using this
Sure.
node. Let's talk about when to use this node and when not to use this node and why it's so good.
Yeah. And I'm very passionate about this when to and when to not use this topic because I will say, I think when AI agents first came out, I was also a victim of this. I got so excited about using them, I just grabbed them for everything AI. But it turns out that's no when to not use an AI agent. When you need and I'm going to describe some of the terms I'm using in here so it'll all be clear. Use a basic LLM chain like the one here when you need a one-shot output from an LLM. You don't need memory or you don't need tools. So what does that mean? As you saw, we've got some text going into that node, right? Text to translate, the world's most popular workflow automation tool for technical teams. We send that into the basic LLM chain, and then the prompt, which is what you would usually write in ChatGPT, the prompt here is I'm combining some static text, translate the following text to German, along with an expression, mapping this data in here. So this result is what the LLM actually gets, and that's why it outputs this. So this is as if in ChatGPT for Fora Mini, you wrote this text and pasted it in, right? Now, the AI agent does not need a tool to use this. It doesn't need to fetch memory for a previous conversation thread. It doesn't need to ping a database to check something. It can just use its brain, right? Its inference to do this in one shot, right? So done. That's a great case for basic LLM chain. And I see a lot of folks using AI agents specifically for this case. Now, it's going to work if you use an AI agent. However, it might take long because the AI agent has to think, first has to construct what it's going to do. So that's already taking tokens, which costs money and latency. And another thing is there's this really neat specific output format thing here. So if I check this, I can add an output parser. Now there's a few different kinds, but the most common one is a structured output parser. This allows me to define the schema that I want the AI agent or any of these LLM steps to output in.
In JSON.
Yeah, in JSON, for example. So this is super useful for anything that's non-chat, right? Because then this outputs a predictable JSON object that I could respond to an HTTP request. I could pull into another node. It's predictable, right? The thing is with structured output, AI agents are actually going to mangle structured output far more likely than an LLM chain. When I say likely, these are probabilistic systems. You have to account for that there will be good outcomes and not good outcomes. And it's about constraining that bell curve to make sure that your good outcomes is good enough and that you're catching the bad outcomes and do something in that case. But basic LLM chains are going to be far more resilient for structured output. So that'd be one good reason why to use them. Another one is they're faster and simpler, less stuff to go wrong. Same thing with text classifier. And so to give you a mental model on this, if I go in the advanced AI section, is basically the basic LLM chain. This is the most simple version where you can define your text, your user message, a system message, right? And an AI model. You can also attach how it outputs, but that's it. From there, we have use case specific chains. So there's the information extractor, question answer chain, sentiment analysis, summarization chain, and the text classifier, which is what you're seeing here, right? So the text classifier classifies by specific categories, which you can find here. Basically, use a basic LLM chain by default. Pick a use case specific chain if your use case is that specific use case because it was designed for it. It's going to be simpler and it's, again, engineered to do that. If it doesn't meet these cases, that is a good time to use an AI agent. AI agents, they can think multiple thoughts. They can perform multiple actions or use tools, depending. Actions, tools are interchangeable. In n8n, we call them tools. And they can access memory. So they can access previous conversations in a chat context, but memory doesn't just have to be chat-based. Again, there's lots of non-chat use cases. So when to use an AI agent? Use cases that require dynamic decision-making or multi-step reasoning. Or when you need to leverage tools to get more context. But I think this is a really good case here that just needing to grab some context isn't the be-all, end-all reason on when to use an AI agent. So for example, here, I would recommend using AI agents when there isn't going to be a predictable sequence of steps. So in this example here, let's say my use case is summarize top 10 posts for the keyword automation every day at 9 a.m. So every day at 9 a.m., this will run. We go in the Hacker News node. We filter by automation. We get the top 10, right? So if I run this, We've got those 10 items. So you can see there's a bunch of
Mhm.
info on those articles, right? That'll get aggregated into one item, and then it'll run into this summarized articles chain. The summarized articles chain, again, is just doing a single step. Take a bunch of this input data that's going to come here, all this, and summarize it. This step doesn't need to think. It just needs to do. It
Yeah,
doesn't need to decide to
it was
call
built for
Hacker News
that.
or do multiple times. Exactly. Now, let's say instead you had a chatbot where you said summarize insights across multiple topics. You may type in, hey, summarize for AI. But then in the system prompts for your AI agent, let's say building this out, you might say, hey, step one, think of related key terms. Search for those key terms. If there's no good results, think again of better key terms. Search again. So there might be like N levels of it thinking and searching and redoing. And it's not going like this. It might have to go like this or like this, depending on the scenario. That is when you use an AI agent.
Boom. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I love AI agents and their nodes for so many reasons, but you also have a lot of different AI agents. Can you talk to us about the different kinds of AI agents you have, or are you just really using the tools agent today?
I can, and I'm really glad you asked that, JJ, because there's this like PSA that I'm personally trying to get out to the community, and that is use the tools agent.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
so good.
yeah. The other agents, now I'm not sure the exact schedule, but the other agents we're not actively working on. I expect they will get deprecated over
Mhm.
time, but we're not actively working on them. Why? Some of these thoughts, like React Agent, beginning of 2024, React was a really good idea. And there's an academic paper on this. I'm not going to try and butcher it, but basically the space is evolving quickly. A lot of the vendors, because again, this AI agent has to work with these top models and stuff, are converging on some of this thinking, are converging on how tools should be called and stuff. So the standardization happening there. The tools agent takes all the latest information, all the latest thinking, and all of our engineering resources that we dedicate on our AI agents, and we're focusing on this. So I expect in future, this whole tab, this whole drop down might get cut. But what I can say is we're focusing on the tools agent.
Yeah,
Now, yeah, so I do believe there isn't a single use case today that you couldn't achieve with a tools agent that you could achieve with some of the other ones.
great. That's my experience as well. I've just used a tools agent. It's like, why do I not use it? This does everything so well if I'm going to use the agent node.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
one thing to keep in mind, so like the conversational agent, it also has tools, for example, right? So you could
Right.
think, hey, I'm having a conversation, use a conversational agent. Under the hood, that would be a poor decision because, especially if you need to use tools, the conversational agent describes to the LLM, hey, here's how you use the tool. And then the LLM has to reply with, okay, here's my response to use the tool.
Mm,
It's really inefficient and it's a lot buggier. The tools agent leverages, and again, I'm not an expert on the minutia of this, but the tools agent leverages advancements made by the likes of OpenAI and Anthropic and stuff on you being able to call tools so that it's not discussing calling it tools. It can just say like call tool. And so that's another great reason why, even though you're going to see there's some functionality in the other agents, I would focus just on the tools.
yeah. What might be one of your favorite nodes besides the AI agent node? Because it's dope. But is there like a node that like you just used a ton of?
Okay, so can I have more than one?
Yeah, of course. It's like
Is
asking a
that
filmmaker their favorite movie,
yeah, right?
right? Yeah.
It's not one I use super often, but the possibilities, especially if you're a developer or again, can use ChatGPT are awesome, is the code tool.
Okay.
Okay. So what this allows you to do is execute JavaScript, or rather, it lets your AI agent execute JavaScript and define input variables, and then you describe like how to use it. So a great example of this would be, let's say you're making an AI agent that generates code. You could have the code that the AI agent wants to like output, like the successful code that it's tasked with creating. And you could have it like code to test would be its input. We have an example here of that code. And you say, hey, use this tool to test code. It outputs errors or success, right? Your AI agent can now try arbitrary code in a sandbox and get feedback in its thinking, right? In its multi-step reasoning on whether the code works or not. Now, if any of you have tried to use AIs for code generation, LMs for code generation, they'll sometimes recommend stuff that immediately fails, right? Even if you just highlighted it in code editor would have
Mhm.
errors. That's happening less, but that's for simple code.
Mhm.
So that's what I really love this. And again, that's for executing arbitrary code. A really cool use case for this. Another one might be there's those things that LMs can get wrong, like counting stuff and whatnot.
Sure.
You could code in JavaScript or again have a ChatGPT write you the function that like takes a string, splits its characters, and then counts the number of R's in strawberry and
Yeah.
returns that. And then the AI's not inferencing that. It's calling this tool, it's receiving a response that was run in deterministic code. That's why I think this one's really cool. I also think you have to get your head around it to understand the possibilities. And that's why I think it gets used less. But
Yeah.
I recommend to everyone, especially if you're getting deep into it, there's some cool things around the code tool. And I'm not even like fully wrapped around. So please do some thinking, please use it, and please show us. Happens all the time in the community. People be like, oh, I use it like this. You're like, what? We
Yeah.
never thought of that.
And those sorts of things are so great because it really opens up your entire platform. Like you can't have always every node, but there's always like a very specific thing you get into a production build and it's like, I just need this one thing run. And so you can put together that JavaScript code to do that. Could you like run libraries, using that tool, something like that?
Yes, you can. So
Wow.
the thing with that is, and this was a be maybe one little thing to add to the self-host cloud thing. As you can imagine, on self-host, you have ultimate flexibility. You also have the flexibility to break it. So on cloud, there is a few things that for the security of others and whatnot, and just like reliability for the whole platform, we do have to limit. So you being able to upload just like any arbitrary library and run
Yeah.
it would obviously just be like a terrible security idea for a public platform. So you can't do that on a cloud product, but you can do that on self-hosted.
Cool.
So for
Makes sense.
example, take like a big heavy video library that would be very hard to recreate, FFmpeg.
Hmm.
There's n8n users that make custom nodes. You can build custom nodes in n8n with TypeScript or JSON, depending on how much flexibility you need. And they upload it to our community node library. There's a public community node library. And there's nodes that literally can generate video, right? On an instance that has enough RAM and stuff to do. But
Yeah.
and that's not what most users are doing, but that's
Yeah.
how flexible it is. For
Yeah.
someone literally using FFmpeg, and I haven't seen this specifically. There's no reason then theoretically where on that instance you couldn't have a custom tool that is running and that is using code that has access to FFmpeg on the same instance as n8n. And again, your AI agent is autonomously like using FFmpeg, which if you know anything about that library, half the video apps we use have that as a dependency, right?
Brilliant. One last topic here, and then I'll get you out of here. Staying on AI agents, of course. What are good examples that you're seeing on your side of people using AI agents today?
Yeah. So when we think about use cases, and I would say also like use cases that have gone to prod, that for me, because there's a lot of interesting stuff, right? But if it's interesting and not super reliable and not reliable enough for the person who's responsible for it to activate it, I think that is a little less compelling, right? Customer support is the biggest one that I'm seeing today. And I think that's because in customer support, you already have the kinds of volumes where it makes sense already, right? Like
So much
if you
knowledge already exists.
so much knowledge, so much human text happening.
Yeah.
And for most support, you have this so many questions are these like couple simple ones.
Hmm.
And then you have the long tail where you actually need your humans.
Hmm.
And I felt this at n8n. As you can imagine, we've started weaving AI into our own processes using n8n, of course. And I'll take some solutions engineer who like knows how to code, who's worked with n8n for 2 years. And then they're answering a billing question, which is, yeah, okay, to reset your credit card, go here. Like that an AI can absolutely do today. And it's definitely frustrating I've talked to our support folks, like they don't love those tickets, right? They
Yeah.
love helping someone on a deep problem when they're being thoughtful and they're so grateful, right? For the deep human like support. And so I think that's a great use case, not only because it's working and it's in prod, but I see the humans that coexist with that system not hate it, not losing their job, so to speak. They get augmented so they can be more human and do more of like the things that humans are.
Right.
That's a big one. I would say the other scenario is really it's a high level bucket, but it's personal automations.
Hmm.
We saw it with pre-AI with n8n, people making personal stuff. But I think what's happening is with how easy it is today to build AI, multiplied by the potential of it. You see something on YouTube, you go, "Are you serious? That's possible? I must go try it." So the barrier to entry being low and the prospect of potential is high, where I think the motivation is high, where I'm seeing so much effort being placed in learning and building on the personal stuff. And I think that's just generally really exciting for all these folks like learning and building and knowing these tools because look, with the way AI rolls out, like with any technology, I think some people's lives are going to get better. Some, at least momentarily, will get worse. Some neutral. But I'm very bullish on the fact like in your industry, if you understand this technology, if you understand how to go to your boss and say, no, I augmented myself. Like my task is 20% faster because there was this annoying grunt work. Obviously, I don't do, but I knew how to build the AI agent that helps me. You're going to be in a much better position. So that's why I'm very like passionate and motivated about emancipating that, getting the word out. But it's personal use cases. And I would say it's all manner of things that waste people's time. On LinkedIn, it'll be the things that filter out all those super crappy messages that you get but then alert you, hey, like a human that contacts you, write to them. Don't AI write it, right? Those kinds of things are defending people's inboxes, their calendars, right? All manner of things like this. And I think what's particularly cool about these personal automations is usually the ideal thing for you is going to be different from that one size fits all SaaS t-shirts. And again, with the reduction of friction, how easy it is to do, I think it's like the best time ever to go solve that specific problem that you have exactly how you need it, not with some SaaS tool that you have to pay money for that you're like, okay, it's what I need, which makes me not really love it and not really want this. Right?
Yeah, we're in an age now where nearly anyone can build what they need, which is just so exciting,
Yeah.
right?
I think we're gonna see one thing I really think we're gonna see is there's gonna be so many more problems that are viable to solve. So take a VC funded startup. You have to have certain number of like total available market to even consider approaching the problem. But with AI, you need less effort on ops. R&D is cheaper. I think one person companies, fractional person companies are going to be able to solve a lot more problems. And I think more disenfranchised groups, smaller groups, groups of like smaller regions that haven't usually been supported by larger tech companies and stuff, there's going to be so much more opportunity to solve those problems and for a smaller party to solve that problem, but still have a good living off of that, but own what they do and stuff. So yeah, I'm really excited.
I'm really excited too. For those that want to learn more about NEN, where do they go?
So the best place is n8n.io, followed by YouTube. If you just type in n8n, we've got the thing I love about our community is that there's just countless videos coming out every day, basically, on all the different ways to use it. And the really neat thing about that is on our official n8n YouTube, as you can imagine, we have tutorials and stuff. But the best tutorial for your learning style or that use case that gets you excited to go build is likely going to come from our community, not from us officially. Obviously, they can do a lot more than we can. So yeah, go to n8n.io, check out some YouTube videos. And then the best place to get help is community.n8n.io. So our community is growing very quickly. And I don't know what it is about our community, but we just happen to attract like the nicest, helpful people that just want to help. So definitely jump in there. The one thing I'd say on the community forums, we're growing pretty quickly. There's been a lot of interest for n8n right now. So just please be polite and fill out your ticket with as much description.
Hmm.
And it may take a little longer than usual to reply, but we're hiring fast and we're working on it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time today, Max. Really, always a pleasure.
Thank you, JJ, so much for the stimulating conversation.
That was incredible. Max is a wealth of knowledge. He has been building in this space for the last 5 years. I remember a year ago announcing the LangChain integration and the NAN, and that was super cool, but I didn't honestly fully understood what it meant at the time. And now getting as deep as I've been getting with my agent course for NAN, it really is an incredible tool. And Max is a great advocate for their system. They're lucky to have him. Very knowledgeable person. Hopefully, you learned a lot on this pod. This pod was a little bit more visual than the audio versions normally. So if you listen to this on audio, give us a chance again and come back and watch it on video as well, because some of the things that he was showing us within NAN were really cool. The code tool was awesome. The ability to self-host your own LLMs for privacy concerns is awesome. The choice about open source for going on the cloud, clear pros and cons there. So hopefully you got a lot out of this podcast interview. And hopefully this just gives you a good general understanding of what an AN can do, the power that it has, and when it might be a good tool for you. Otherwise, I will see you next week on No Code plus AI. It will be another great show for you, as always. Until then, tell your friends about the pod, share it around. We've had some incredible momentum. Help us keep it great. I will see you next week in No Code plus